Yes, that's correct, right? The meditation doesn't stop. So welcome back to week 3. And before we go into a student presentation, I really want to, I'm going to do the job of doing like the review, like where are we up until now? And I think that would be helpful to just kind of keep us on track, especially for those who may have missed a class or two. So I'm just going to share my screen here. So can everyone, oops, let me just see this. Can everyone see this slide? Okay, great, thank you. So we are focusing on in this semester on practice. The items of mindfulness in daily applications is what we're looking at right now. But the question is that you may be asked is, when you meet someone for the first time, so what is one Buddhist practice? Right? And what's the first thing that comes to your mind, or what's the first thing you would say to that person? Right? If you look at our doctrinal chart, it's very clear what our practice is. We are really practicing so we get to the point where it's timeless sun, placeless sun, where our meditation is in every place and in every moment, right? So if you see on this doctrinal chart on the left side, it's the gateway of faith. On the right, it's the gateway of practice. We are all trying to discover that which is ineffable, right? That we all have as our original nature. But how do we do that? We do that through this timeless and placeless sun. But the reaction can be sometimes overwhelming. Where do I start? If you say timeless, placeless, sometimes you can be overwhelmed and think that's very broad, that's very abstract. And it reminds me of a time when I saw a little baby, and the baby was holding a grape, and the grape was very big. So what would happen if the baby just ate that big grape? It would maybe choke, right? Maybe choke on the grape. So what did the mother do? The mother took the grape and broke it into smaller pieces. And that's what Master Suttison did with this teaching. He's saying, here is timeless and placeless sun, but I'm going to break it down for you to make it so that you can actually achieve it. But he first explains, well, what is this? And he explains this in the chapter of timeless Dharma of timeless sun. He said, sun is a practice that leads to the achievement of freedom of mind through gaining awakening to one's own nature, which is originally free from discrimination or attachment. So what is the purpose of our practice? Eventually that we achieve freedom of mind. How? By awakening to our own nature. What does your nature look like? It's originally free from discrimination or attachment. So in this one line, it tells you the purpose of practice, how to do it, and what it looks like. But again, he breaks this up. So he says, so this is what we're aiming for in our practice. But in order to do that, we need to have the threefold study, right? And we talked about this in last semester, the cultivating spirit, inquiry, choice, and action, right? Calming the mind, honing wisdom so that we can make mindful choices in our life. But Master Suttison is very kind and compassionate. He breaks that down for us again. And that's why he gives us the essential dharmas of daily practice. So in this essential dharmas of daily practice, we have threefold study, we have the fourfold grace, we have the four essentials, and all of this. And this is what we recite in the morning, in the evening, whenever we face a sensory condition. This has the essence of all the principles, core principles of our teachings. But if you look at this list of 9 essential dharmas of daily practice, look at the verbs. Try to identify the verbs in each from number 1 to number 9. You'll notice it has give rise to, remove, turn, 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 turn. Now, anyone who's practiced this essential dharmas of daily practice, I'm speaking from my own experience, it's not easy all the time. To turn your mind, to remove, to give rise to, it takes work. It requires energy, it requires motivation. And it's easy to make this a mental, a theoretical teaching, right? It's like, oh, the essential dharmas, of course, live a life of gratitude, or, I should be a better learner. So in my head, I can memorize this, and in my head, it's perfectly in my head. But how do we actualize this? And that's why he brings in training. Okay. This is why. So I'm just bringing it down for you. So we have the essential dharmas, but in order to do that, we need training. And what training is basically repetition. Right. And we have in Bon Buddhism, we have what's fixed term training, which is a specific time and place. And then the daily training, which is what we're focusing on right now. The fixed term training and the items of mindfulness regarding temple visits are all for the purpose so that we can really, truly apply the items of mindfulness in daily applications. Right. So this is why these items of mindfulness and daily applications are extremely important. And I'm going to make these the slides available. I'll post this up later on. So again, this idea of training, from morning. And that's why it's not just practice, it's the act of training. And for the purpose so that we use our mind well, right? So that every day that when we're making choices in our life, we're going in the direction of making blessings and wisdom to live a happier life, not just for myself, but for those around me. Because as we all know, we're not living in the mountains. Of course, it would be wonderful to go on a retreat in the quiet area. That's sometimes necessary. But we all have a livelihood. You can be living in the city, maybe in the suburbs, but the reality is we're always interacting with people, with the environment, with different things. So how we use our mind is so important. When times are good, it's less so. It's the work is the mind practice really comes when we face those difficult moments, those challenging moments, those what we call the sensory conditions, and that's when the practice kicks in. So the beauty of this practice is that Master Sotaesan wanted to make it very simple and very rational so that anyone and everyone can integrate it from the moment they wake up, when they have their coffee in the morning, when they're eating a meal, to when they're working until they go to bed. Right? So for the last few weeks and for the next few weeks, we'll be focusing on those 6. So just kind of a reminder of why these 6 items of mindfulness are so essential. Okay. And with that, we will go to Bob, who will be doing the 3rd item.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Although it occurred to me today after spending a good bit of time watching television yesterday, inauguration and following things, everything seems a little different today. Wonderfully different, actually. So I don't have a PowerPoint. I'm sorry. I do have some show and tell that I may show along with this. So we'll see how that works. And clearly for all of us, the last year was pretty tumultuous for all of us, I think. And 2021 didn't get off to a much better start. We had an invasion of our capital, another impeachment of our president, more growth of the COVID-19 pandemic. And if we think about it, probably a lot of other calamities, both in this country and around the world. But it's a new year, and New Year's is a time for reflection and resolutions. And as usual, I found at least that there's so much to glean from our readings for this week and Reverend Lee's presentation. I found it a challenge to what to focus on. But because of the timing, I thought I'd focus on the readings of Cardinal Master Shongsan. And we read that at a New Year's ceremony, he said, "The newness of the new year lies not in the day, but in our minds. So to reinforce with renewed resolve our dedication to both our practice and our enterprises is the true meaning of meeting the new year. Accordingly, every day is a new day, and every year is a new year, if you check your mind accordingly." He also said, make your resolutions extraordinary, but your conduct ordinary. Boy, have I followed that one. I tend to make a lot of resolutions. I don't follow them very well. But this year I've just made one, that I will take better care of myself. And that may seem self-serving, but how can I be helpful and supportive of others if I don't take care of myself? And since I just turned 75 this past year, I take that pretty seriously. My plan is to improve myself both physically and mentally. I've always had a battle with my weight, and I jokingly tell friends that last year I made a resolution to lose 10 pounds. This year I only have 14 to go. Venerable Chosan wrote in his book that the source of physical body can be, he said in his book that the physical body can be a source of great consternation for the mind. And I found that to be true as well. A couple of years ago, my weight was actually impacting my health. I developed sleep apnea. And so I got the CPAP machine and needed that to breathe at night. But I joined a gym and Weight Watchers. I lost enough weight that I could give the CPAP machine away. I'll also admit to being an inveterate list maker. So I kept track of my weight last year and this year. In fact, I don't know if you see it. There it is. Oops, goes even further. Well, anyway, if you can see there, I lost a good bit of weight and gained a bit back during the all our quarantining during the pandemic, but I'm working on it again. It's funny, it kind of that up and down graph kind of parallels my Dharma practice and training as well, which means I need to concentrate on some things. To improve myself mentally, as Master Shongsan said, if we apply ourselves to our practice with renewed resolve, our whole life will be renewed. So I resolved, as part of this making myself better, taking care of myself, to continue my current Buddhist practices, which involve virtual services on Sundays, my Thursday morning Dharma group, this class, of course, and occasional retreats. But I needed to add and focus on daily journaling and sitting meditation, which I've not been particularly good at. Again, Master Shongsan recommended keeping a daily diary and a fixed diary. Well, I have a fixed term diary where I record thoughts and feelings. I used to put it in just a spiral notebook, right? But after Christmas, I was able to go to Barnes & Noble and get a really nice leather brown one on sale. It's almost embarrassing to write in it. The paper's so classy. But I've done that, and I also, to keep track of this is one of my my teachers here in the temple in Chapel Hill suggested that I have a checkoff sheet so that I keep track of that. Well, I have one that I keep on my refrigerator. And I check, I'm supposed to be doing certain exercises for my knees and my wrists and all. I check those off, my journaling, meditation. I even keep track of my weight down here. Turns out that I do really well on meditation. Every day since January 1st, I've done meditation. I've gotten a little better at journaling, exercise, not so much, but it's been raining a lot. But again, the master advises physical life is a side job. Spiritual life is the main occupation. When I think about the mental turmoil that we've all been through recently, I think about my grandparents, the ones on my mother's side. My father was much older than my mother, and I never got to know his parents. But my mother's mother and father were born in 1892 and 1893, respectively, in Red Bluff, California, where I was born. They were both from ranching families, and their parents had come out to California about the time of the gold rush. So they were old enough in 1903 to understand when they heard on the radio that the Wright brothers had flown an airplane. No doubt as a 10 and 11-year-old, they were both thrilled and amazed. But their happy youth was followed by World War I. In fact, here's a picture of my grandfather in 1916 in his uniform, getting on the troop train. That was followed by the Spanish flu of 1918. Then they had to go through the Depression of 1929, which was followed by World War II. One of their sons, my uncle, was a radio operator on a bomber that was shot down over Sicily, and he had to sneak out through German lines. Their son-in-law, my father, nearly perished when his troop ship iced over and capsized in the Arctic, and was several days before he was rescued. My grandparents must have been distraught over what was happening to their family members. Then, of course, came the Korean War, more recessions, and then the turmoil of the 60s with the assassination of both Kennedys, Martin Luther King, the race riots, followed by Vietnam, where I was wounded, and Watergate. But to my never-ending amazement, both my grandparents were always optimistic, no matter what had happened. Why? Because they'd seen it all, and they had survived, and they'd actually prospered. Even more amazing, interestingly, though I don't think they ever flew on an airliner, they lived long enough to see man walk on the moon, from the Wright brothers to Neil Armstrong in one lifetime. Is there anything we as a people can accomplish if we put our minds to it? So after the events of January 6th, when people told me it just can't get any worse, my answer is yes, it can. And it has. And it probably will be again. But we've always made it through, and we've generally come out better. So now, today, we have a new government. We have a vaccine on the way. I got my shot. I'm 75. And finally, I'll close by saying that at that same New Year's Day ceremony, Cardinal Master Chong San said, by becoming new persons with the coming new year, we ought to be able to build a new nation and a new world with our own strengths and rejoice in a new paradise of Ilwan. So say we all.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for preparing all of that other material, too, pictures and graphs, and to support your presentation. And also a very hopeful message when many people may be feeling, down. But yes, was there any reflections about Bob's presentation or any thing that came up for you as you were listening? Patty?
Bob, that was really wonderful. And that's great that you have those pictures. And I'm going to take your graft and checklist into mind for my going forward now. Seriously, seriously. Um, but I think that what's most important and something that in my own life I've had to come to terms with is you may think you have it bad, but like you said, look at what happened. Look what people have survived and gone through, even in other countries where their whole cities were blown up and people had to get in queues for a loaf of bread or an egg, you know, and people overcome. And what helps them overcome that, I think, is a sense of faith. They may not know it, and I'm just guessing, but it has to be that there is some faith inside that this isn't the end. There's more to come, and the idea of to persevere. And so my father used to tell me as I was growing up, and I'd ask his advice, and he'd say, "Don't worry about it. The money will be there when you really need it." Like, oh my God, how am I going to pay the bills? And I got to pay rent. And don't worry about it. Right. So I think that that's like an underlying message that no matter what's going on around us, and I think that our Master Soda-san talks about it. I read somewhere that, the I don't know what the term was, but it was like the calm sea underneath the storm where the waves are, going crazy, that we remain calm underneath all of that, and I think that that story really reminded me of that, just to remain in that space of peace and calm. And that brings acceptance and tolerance and moving forward. Thank you very much, Bob.
Thank you.
Yeah, Wando.
Good evening, everybody. I wanted to first thank Catherine for meditation. Um, it was a very great meditation, so thank you for that. And what I appreciate, Catherine, is your your having us focus on being grateful and mindful of every moment of our experience. I resonated really strongly with your metaphor with the shower, to really think about when we're when we're taking a shower, are we really mindful of the water hitting our face and our body, and how we feel. Because I was exactly doing that these last 2 weeks. I unfortunately got sick with COVID here in LA, and it's like the epicenter here in the nation, where almost 1 in 3 of Angelinos are getting COVID. And so it's everywhere here. And it was the most intense physical suffering I've had experienced in a very, very long time. I just couldn't breathe. I had to go to the emergency room. It was very difficult. And so these last 2 weeks really helped me really think about how precious the breath is and our breathing is, and how I'll never take that for granted ever again. Because I was really gasping for air, and I was pretty healthy, and I'm an athlete, and it hit me so hard. And so these last 2 weeks being in the shower, I was just gasping for air, and each day got a little bit better, a little bit better. But I just put my hand under that water and just really try to take in the air. And so thank you for that. Just being really mindful of every moment and how we're feeling. And so thank you, Kathy, for that. And Bob, thank you so much for sharing your life experience and your family's experiences. Very powerful, and very grateful for all that your family has accomplished and you have accomplished, Bob. And I really resonated when you shared how Mr. Chung Sung talked about the source of the physical body can be a source of great consternation for the mind. I really resonated with that, because obviously this last experience was a huge source of consternation for my mind. And what kept me going was the meditation. Just lying, I had to lie on my stomach and just listen to Ilwan San chant, and really just focus on just the mind on the breath, and inhaling and exhaling, and really also contemplating like what impermanence really means. Like this can be taken away from us at any time, at any place, and being grateful for what we have now. And so I really appreciated that, Bob. And I'm with you. I'm also struggling with journaling. And so I got to find a way to start journaling. I haven't been able to do that effectively. And so I'm hoping through this semester that by the time our class ends, I can share with everyone that I'm successfully journaling daily. So that's my goal. So thank you for sharing that, Bob. Thank you.
And thank you, Wando. It's good to see you. Very good to see you. All right, Reverend Yu, is that a Reverend Yu?
Are there more sharings? No? Okay. Thank you so much, Bob. Your presentation, I like that. It's based on your practical, very practical. So, and it's great to see you, James. And when our founding master passed away in 1943, June 1st, 5 days before, he had some meal and became very, very sick. His students panicked. He had been very, very healthy person. And a couple of students called to the doctor. The doctor came to the headquarters. He was so sick, he could not go to the hospital. And it took a lot of money. The Korean headquarters was very poor at the time. 3 doctors arrived at the same time. Seeing that, our founding master said, the reason why I taught the Dharma, why you practice the Dharma is to apply that in this kind of a situation. In other words, they lost their center and they could not make a very good choice. That's why I like the grace preview. The first item, in all your applications, the original Korean word 응용하는데 literally means when you apply the Dharma in your activities, in all your applications or action, by both are good, be mindful to make choices with a sound thought. Make a very good choice. That's the fruit of your practice. Think about your house. Think about your car. After you started to practice, after you come to the temple, if your house is not more organized, if your car is not more clean, or you don't have a better relationship with your spouse and friend, probably your practice, your life is like a very beautiful tree with a lot of flowers in full blossom that does not have fruit. That's our founding master's analogy, not mine. That's the first item. We have to apply the Dharma in our daily life. That's the first item. The second item, always carry this scripture. Before engaging in an application, in our activities, be mindful to study to study for it in advance by observing the circumstances. After medieval times, France, England, and Germany has been superpower for a long time, especially England and France. As we know, when they fought, I think you have heard the 100 Years' War between England and France. They fought for a long time. Why? In terms of their military or political capacity, etc., they were pretty equal. But when Nazi invaded France, do you know how many months or years it took for German soldiers to occupy completely all the corners of the Paris? It's not years like 100 years war. It took exactly 6 weeks. French government panicked. They formed a allied force with Belgium and Holland. But within 6 weeks, they just surrendered. Why? French government was not prepared. After World War I, everything in Germany became ruined. From the scratch, German people started again. But for 20 years, they progressed exponentially. France was in a very different situation. They were not prepared. That proud country lost their sovereignty. just like Nazis all of a sudden invaded France. Some financial situations, a mental crisis can happen in your life if you are not prepared. So the second item is be mindful to study for it and prepare by observing their circumstances. Today we will focus on the third item. Let me read. I rephrased so that it can flow a little better in English. Be mindful to study and practice scripture when you have free time. Okay, say after me. Be mindful to study and practice scripture. Be mindful,
Study and practice.
and practice scripture. Very good. When I was in high school, there was a news break. Korean airline, which left Seoul to JFK, it's a commercial airline, was shut down by the Soviet missile. More than 200 people, civilians, died in a split second. That raised very serious diplomatic issues. Do you know why they launched the missile? South Korea didn't get along with North Korea, but they were fine diplomatically with the USSR. Because Korean airline deviated from its path and entered the Soviet domain, Soviet space. Think about your practice. Think about your life. Are we walking on that proper destined path? When I say destined path, the proper path, it means Dharma path leading to complete liberation. Maybe whether you're a practitioner or not, not many people in this world knows the exact path. Even though you know the exact path, knowing the path is one thing, walking the path is a completely different matter. Jesus said, I'm the way, I'm the truth, I'm the life. I'm the way, I'm the path. Do you know scripture is when they say scripture, you Westerners remind of a Bible, Quran, etc. In the Buddhist Dharma books, scripture is a translation of a Chinese character, Gyeongjeon. Jeon literally means a text, a book. Do you know what Gyeong means? Gyeong. Gyeong. Grace, do you know what Gyeong literally means? Gyeong literally means the path. The path. We needed to know the path. What is the path? Scripture is the path that provides you to eternal freedom or indestructible happiness. This is a Chinese saying. Before a saint is born, the way is in the heavens. Heavens means the realm of universal truth. When the saints come to the world, the way resides with that saint. When the saint passes away, the way is in the scripture. If some of you have visited a Buddhist monastery in Asia, inside, in front of the main temple at the courtyard, you may see two lion images, stone images, holding up their four paws, holding one crystal ball, two lion images. Crystal ball represent nirvana or our true nature. Two stone lion images symbolizes two paths to nirvana. One lion, one path means the path of study, just like we are doing, just like it. The another path is the path of practice. As I always say, when you drive to Washington, D.C., then nirvana, you have to know the path, and then you need to drive. Without knowing the path, just driving very hard, what does that mean? Many people, most of the people in this world live in that way. Without knowing the path, they just drive their car, the vehicle called our life, very, very hard. As I said in the previous class, one of my friends, when I visited Korea 4 years ago, he's a very rich person. He's a public accountant. He said that he feels very empty. All day long, he's working in the office. He makes a lot of money already, but what's my life worth, etc. Before driving our car, we have to know the path. Do you know, in a very simple way, why people suffer? They don't drive their car on the destined path. They do not know the path. If they know the path, they drive on the proper path, whether they are successful or less successful, or they're rich or poor, etc. They can lead a life of contentment because they know they will eventually reach that destination. Be mindful to study and practice the scripture when you have free time. When you read the scripture, you can see very clearly what is the path. You know, in Zen tradition, particularly in the Tibetan tradition, in the West, when you come to the temple, meditation Sangha, you start to practice meditation. That's not bad. But in Asia, when you become the novice monk, before starting practice meditation, you need to study scripture in Korea 4 or 5 years, in Tibet more than 7 years. In other words, before driving your car, you have to know the path, the scripture. Our third, you may have the teacher. You can completely surrender yourself, which is not many. But the primary, the first scripture is our primary teacher is our scripture. That's what our Venerable Tesan, our third head Dharma master, said. First teacher is the scripture. I went to the Cairo probably 7 or 8 years ago. The tour guide said, on the stone of the pyramid, which was built 4,000 years ago, there is an inscription people for fun inscribed something. The scriber says, these days, the younger generations are very rude. We are very worried about their idea of a sexual revolution. What they worried about, not 100 years ago, 4,000 years ago in Egypt, is exactly the same. In Korea, America, it's all the same. People worried about the financial situation, human relationship problem. It's all the same, depression. How can you solve all those problems? When you read the scripture, you do not have to ask to your teacher. When you read the scripture carefully, the answer is all there. Read the One Buddhism scripture. Our founding master tells you in a very detailed how to educate your children well, how to make money, etc. So what is, we cannot see whether we are clean or not. We can feel that. When we see in the mirror, we can clearly tell whether we are clean or not. When you read the scripture, you can tell whether your practice is going in the right direction or your life is going the right direction. I'm not sure, Grace, that Chinese acupuncturist is still working at the one institute. I forgot her name. I was a little sick and I went to her. She checked my purse. It was so surprising. She read my purse for less than 1 minute. Do you know what? She told my personality, my characteristic, my way of style, all just like a prophet, just like she has some spiritual eyes open. Just checking my purse, she could tell all the things in my life and pinpointed what's wrong in my body. Realize the teachers. Buddhas are just like those medical doctors. He or she exactly tells you what's wrong in our mind, what's wrong in our life. As I said before, these days people around yourself, your friend, the parent, try to say something that does not please your ears. They try to something that's sweet to your ears. But the healthy food is not necessarily delicious food. So Buddha called himself a medicine king. He called Bhisakha. This Bhisakha Sanskrit means supreme surgeon. Or Buddha called himself Anuttara. Anuttara really means great physician. He knows exactly how to cure our body and mind. And can I talk 5 more minutes? Okay, yeah, okay. Our founding master said after he finished writing the One Buddhism canon, he poured a lot of time. The theory of quantum physics, the theory of relativity for idiots, Even I read that book, I could not understand what quantum physics or theory of relativity. Attaining great enlightenment is one thing. Expressing that in a very easy, practical way is another thing, our founding master thing. Delivering the Dharma to regular people in an easy way is as much as important as attaining great enlightenment. But he made that. Shakyamuni Buddha or our founding master, it's contained in the scripture. Grace, are you the member of a Bali that fitness center in Philadelphia? Are you still?
I was a member of LA Fitness
Oh,
before.
LA Fitness. Okay. Yeah, I was a member of a Bali.
We call it La Fitness.
Okay. I was a Bali Fitness member in Philadelphia for probably 7 years. After 3 years, do you know how much my monthly pay? Less than $10. How could they manage to run that center, big fancy center? Do you know the reason? So many people register Bali Fitness Center. Less than 20% actually go to that center to use that facility. That's why the monthly fee really became very lower and lower. Reading diet book all day long will not help you lose weight. That's why be mindful to study and practice the scripture. Study and practice the scripture. Do you know what happens after our town is struck by flood? Think about that. Your house is flooded because of the pouring rain. Do you know what happens first after flood? Think about you're in China. You will have no water to drink. All the waters are polluted, tainted. In the middle of all waters, you have nothing to drink. These days, so many commentary on the scriptures and the Dharma books are printed. It's just one click away so that you can use. We are inundated with so many Dharma books, just like flood. But it says, be mindful to study and practice scripture, not the Dharma books. So we need to focus on that. It's written in a very easy way. Why? In order for us to use that very easily. That's the direction of the modern Buddhism and the one Buddhist scripture. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Yu.
Yeah.
Are there any questions after listening? So Reverend Yu, did you know that you were paying $10, but they were charging me $20? I think that was the issue. Okay, so Reverend Yu, you brought up some really important points. I love how you talked about study and practice. So when you go into your small groups, just some questions. So number one, how do you use your free time? Right? How do you use your free time now? And number two, how do you study and practice scripture? Like, how do you incorporate that into your daily schedule? And if not, what are some of the challenges or obstacles that prevent you from incorporating that into your daily schedule? So I will post the questions up in the chat room, but for now, I'll open up the rooms. And but 20 minutes. And I made sure this time that you changed partners. So you'll probably be with a new group of people. So let's see here. Well, welcome back, everyone. So just with the first question, I'm curious how some people are using, what are you using for your free time? Anyone want to share free time? Or the second question, how do you study and practice scripture? Was there anything that came up for your group? Tips for the rest of us. Okay, Bob and then Diane.
We had some great ideas on, one was finding free time. Everybody, well, except for me, I'm retired, so my life is free time. As they say, for me, every day is Saturday. But people who are busy, people who have children, people who have jobs and children, on and on. And sometimes you actually have to schedule your free time because otherwise you'll just stay busy all the time with your job and other duties that you have, and you'll never take time for yourself. And as I mentioned in our group, somewhere in the readings, not in this week's readings, Master Soda-san said, don't kill yourself over this. You know, don't get so wrapped up in your Buddhism that you wear yourself out. You are supposed to take time to relax and have a vacation and that kind of thing. But as far as the practice, the good ideas that came up, Ida had a great one. She's taken the maxims and she actually copies one down every day, and that allows her to absorb it and to reflect on it. And others of us talked about, I do the same thing when we do our assignments, our lessons, our readings. I take lots of notes, and I gather all of us, we can't resell these things because they're all marked up with the questions and things underlined and that sort of thing. And so I think a lot of it, I was in higher education for 40 years, but in learning, we learn different ways. And if you just read something, you may not absorb it, but if you underline it, if you copy things down, it gives you time to reflect on what you've seen. And I think you'll absorb more. So that's kind of the common theme we seem to have in our little group.
That's wonderful, Bob. And thank you for sharing with the rest of the group. After Diane, I'd be interested, Ida, in if you can explain that maxim practice sounds really powerful. So, but we'll start with Diane. Yeah.
I'm going to pass, Grace. I'm going to pass.
Okay. Ida, then, would you be able to share that? That's really a great practice.
Okay. Actually, I kind of introduced my habit or practice by remembering the wonderful time that I had at Youngsan with our mini program. And one of the practices, or one of our classes, shall I say, is that we chose sections of the scripture that we wanted to copy. And, oh, sorry, the child downstairs is being a little noisy. And then we reflected in writing. And then I think once or twice a week we met together and we shared what we copied, what we thought we got out of it. Well, anyway, I'll be quick. And what questions we might have. And, you know, we kind of had some groupthink so that we could all help each other in reflecting on the scriptures. And I think that, you know, because of the way our class is structured, that will be a wonderful thing. The other thing is that I started with the maxims, but in the readings, we have so much. We have such a wealth of information and a wealth of wisdom that it's really kind of hard to say, oh, how can I not look at this one? So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Ida. I think so. This is great. If there's any other tips or ways that people are incorporating scripture reading, so there's one method Ida's using of actually writing it down, which is one way of doing it. Is there any other practices that people are doing right now, incorporating their daily schedule? Yes, John.
Well, I'll just mention what we talked about in our group. We had Kathy and Jay, and one thing that stuck out is when both Kathy and Jay do much more than I do. I really don't do any right now, unless I'm joining something like a course like this. One thing that Kathy said is with her groups that she's a member of, affiliated with her women's group or with her Dharma study group. These are things that kind of structure your time so that you would normally be reading it. So Kathy finds herself reading all the time. So perhaps just putting some structure and taking courses like this, or joining a Dharma study group, we can get more regular about it.
Thank you, John. And Tiffany?
So in our group, I was with Diane and Patty. There was a conversation about starting the day off with intentions, where we thought a lot about what Kathy was saying. And as you go along with reading the scriptures, how do you apply it? Kind of a faith in action. Because we found like it's very easy to sit, to meditate, and to think about it. But when you're hit with those sensory conditions, it's really kind of the rubber hits the road. So if you start your day thinking, even if I'm just, running errands or I'm approaching work, how do you do that differently than you did the day before? And it all reaches back to the Dharma, because you're always exposed to other people's dharmas. So how do you sort of learn discernment and process? So yeah, we talked a lot about how do you make it applicable outside of seated meditation and reading.
That's wonderful. And for Tiffany and Diane's group, it's you write this intention down, or it's just a kind of like a silent?
It's a silent one. Yeah.
Great. Mm-hmm. Okay. So oh yes, Allison, welcome.
Well, in our group, I was very impressed by thank you so much for sharing that. It's easy to not do it and to let your time go by. So he does that, and he sort of equates it to an athletic training. If you want to get better at whatever you're doing, then you have to put in the time and you have to work on it and you have to practice. And he's obviously seeing the results of what he's doing, and we're so glad to have him here with us right now. We chatted about journaling, how we are having a bit of more of a difficult time getting with the journaling. And Isabel gave us some wonderful advice about trying to find a journaling class, because she said taking the class just made the difference for her, totally made the difference. And so we felt that that was very good advice. And Christine, of course, does her daily meditation group with friends, and there's a beauty in being with friends and doing this together. It's quite wonderful. And we talked a little bit about mindfulness and taking the time to assess situations before jumping in, taking a breath, and following and teaching. And Christine said, yep, taking a breath is the settling piece. And I kind of love that, the settling piece. It helps you move forward. So that was just.
Thank you so much for that, Allison. I love this discussion about setting an intention. So if we just take a moment in the chat box, can you just share your intention for this week for your practice, especially reflecting on this third item of mindfulness? What kind of intention can you set for this week ahead of really incorporating, practicing or studying and practicing the scripture? So just take a moment and in the chat box, just share what your intention would be. So for example, in Ida's case, the intention would be to continue, writing from the chapter of Maxims, for example. And this way we can just kind of get ideas from each other, and set that intention out there as well. So just take a moment. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, great. Mm. Wow, these are really great. Yep. As I mentioned. Mm-hmm. 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 Okay. Great. So this is wonderful. So I love people are incorporating like reflections, also silence, koans, even reflecting on, what terms do I want to be more familiar with? Contemplation. Yep. This is great. So let's do our best. And remember, if we skip a day, that's okay. There's another day, right? Yay. So Reverend Yu, would you have some final words for us?
Yeah.
Before we close?
I love all of your intentions. I hope it will be transformed very well into your action so that your life will bloom. During Prohibition, 2 college students sneak out of the dormitory to join some party where there are lots of drinking and dancing. On their way to that party place, one student happened to see one placard. On the night, in such and such church, the Moody is very famous Christian evangelist at that time. Moody was preaching. So he changed his mind. Well, this is very rare opportunity. We can drink and play on every weekend. But his friend said, well, we already made a promise with our friend to join the party. Let's go to that place. So one student went to the church and listened to the Moody's sermon. Another student went to that party. To make a long story short, the college student who joined the party, there's nothing wrong, but he became involved in drinking too much and became alcoholic and involved in some crimes, and he eventually ended up in a jail after 20 years. One morning, when the prison guard delivered a morning newspaper, he opened that and read that his friend, his roommate, became a president of the United States. His roommate who went to the church to listen to the Moody's sermon. Think about that situation. It might seem very trivial at the moment. What's the big deal going to the church, going to the party? But each and every time we make a lot of a choice, his friend probably made a very wise choice. The first item of mindfulness that we start in all your applications, make a good choice based on a sound thought. And then he changed his life goal, his friend, and prepared himself very well to become the leader of the United States. He actualized the second item of mindfulness. Before engaging all activities, prepare yourself well in advance of time. And by listening to the Moody's sermon, he found out the path. Study and practice the scripture. So if we put into action these are 6 items of mindfulness in our daily activities, whether it's a political area or in our practice, we can become the president of the world, not in the United States. But you are past the first barrier. You already registered this Thursday night class. So you already put into action the first item of mind, make a very good choice. And then I encourage you to prepare yourself in all things. Our founding master said repeatedly, your meeting me is like a blind person happen to hold a doorknob, the door leading to liberation. Think about that, you're a blind person. How can you happen to, you fumble around, how can you hold the doorknob? We know the analogy, Mangum, blind turtle, encountering the drifting wood so that he can put his chin on top of that wooden piece and breathe. That wooden piece, that turtle comes to the surface of the ocean once in 1,000 years. But the thing is that turtle is blind. The chance to become a human being and meet the Buddha Dharma is just like that sleep. At first, I thought that that's just an analogy, that's exaggeration in college people. The more I practice, it's really, really true. It's a reality. It's a very, very rare chance for sentient beings to become a human and meet the Buddha Dharma. What is meeting the Buddha Dharma? Well, I happen to see one Dharma center, I happen to see one institute and registered the class. Well, maybe that's a part of it. They say meditation is the mind of the Buddha. Observing precepts are the action of the Buddha. Scripture are the speech of the Buddha. So authentic meeting Buddha or Buddha's teaching is carrying out these threefold practice, just like the first item of mindfulness in daily practice. Practicing meditation so that our mind can resemble like the Buddhas. And we need to observe precepts and observe all kinds of mindfulness. You may have your own items of mindfulness apart from this one. And read the scripture. If we follow on this path, threefold practice, threefold path, then we will be exactly like Shakyamuni Buddha and the Sotasa. Thank you.
Thank you for that closing. And the fact that any one of us can be the president of the whole world. So whoever reaches that first, don't forget about the rest of us. Guide us. Okay. So everyone, thank you so much. Have a good night. And next week is week 4, and presenting will be Isabel. And the fourth item is people who have achieved a basic knowledge of the scriptures, being mindful to study and practice koans or the case for questioning. Okay. All right. So everyone, bye. Good night. Yeah.